Hi, this is Jeff Kober, and we welcome you to Disney Insights. There's been much discussion over the years about Disney's intellectual properties being the driver of choosing new attractions being built in the parks. And with recent openings like World of Frozen at the new Disney Adventure World, there has been a lot of speculation that Disney has focused more on single IP offerings rather than lands as there have been in the past. We study attractions built previously and those soon to come to see if worlds with single intellectual properties are the way of the future over lands. And then we note something called relations, which consists of twins, siblings, and orphans. We'll introduce these terms and how they relate to each other in terms of deciding what to build, where to build it, and the scale by which it is built. From this, we'll identify what the most likely paths forward for Imagineering as it tries to build its future forward with the most options possible, particularly at Disney's Hollywood Studios, Disney California Adventure, and Disney's Adventure World. So join us for how Disney lays out theme parks, IPs, lands, worlds, and relations. This podcast is produced by myself and Performance Journeys, which offers training, development, and consultant support to organizations big and small and entrepreneurs new and established. With a wide variety of resources and long-time in-the-trench experience, we offer workshops, online learning, coaching, and so much more to organizations who want to build their teams, improve organizational excellence, develop leadership, and create customer loyalty. Check us out at performancejourneys.com. And as with our podcast, be sure to check out this website, Disney Insights, where we offer key points, photos, videos, links, and more. In fact, in today's discussion, we'll refer to several charts found on DisneyInsights.com. Note that our YouTube carries our podcast as well, so please subscribe to our Disney Insights YouTube page, as it will be more a part of our social media strategy moving forward. We appreciate any positive ratings, reviews, or referrals that you make. Well, let's to better understand our discussion today, let's define a few words. An IP is an intellectual property. In this case, one that Disney has created, usually from its films like Tangled, The Mandalorian, The Incredibles, or Captain America. Sometimes it even brings in outside intellectual properties such as the new Bluey attractions opening at Disneyland and Walt Disney World. To this, a land is a place where many park experiences and or even IPs coexist to include attractions, entertainment, character meet and greets, retail, and food and beverage. You know, lands like Frontierland or Adventureland, but also other lands that exist in other non-Magic Kingdom style parks. Now, a world is different than a land. It's a place where only one experience and or particularly one IP singularly exists, offering the same things a land does, but only themed to one singular intellectual property. Note that this term is being used for purposes of our discussion today and doesn't reflect larger marketing or titular uses of the word like World Showcase or Walt Disney World. It means themed lands based on one intellectual property such as Toy Story Land, World of Frozen, and Pandora, World of Avatar. Relations, as we're going to talk about it today, stands for one of three things: twins, siblings, or an orphan. A twin is a nearly identical attraction brought from one park or resort to another. It's been done for decades. Many of the attractions that opened up at Walt Disney World were attractions that originally opened up at Disneyland, for instance. And essentially, they are twins to it. For instance, one carousel, even though the carousels are a little different, the idea of having a carousel in Fantasyland is essentially a twin to another. Bringing the Skyway, even though it was a different layout, were essentially a twin brought from one end to another. Or, for instance, having, a horse-drawn carriage down Main Street. That would also be an example of a twin. We will especially outline those worlds in this conversation today that are twins to each other, like Toy Story Land or Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. A sibling is an IP that is represented in more than one park at any given resort. In other words, whereas Beauty and the Beast might be in one park, you can find it represented in a different way in another park. It's not a twin, but it is a sibling, and they share the same intellectual property. And then we have orphans. Orphans are an experience and or an IP that seems to reside outside of any world or land. We'll give some examples of that a little later. All of these relate to each other in terms of deciding what to build, where to build it, and the scale by which it is built. So from all of this, let's construct how Imagineering is approaching their work when it comes to adding new attractions and experiences to its parks. Let's first look at the resort that has made the discussion of worlds come alive lately. It is Disneyland Paris Resort. It has two parks. The original park that was built back in the 90s is very much a land park, if any. In fact, it's probably the most dedicated land park you can imagine. For instance, you have Main Street USA, you have Frontierland, you have Adventureland, you have Fantasyland, and you have Tomorrowland. This is a nearly perfect land park with only one exception, kind of an orphan that I'm going to talk about in a minute. There is also a secondary park, which was originally called Walt Disney Studios Paris, but as of this week, it is now called Disney Adventure World. And the idea is that the worlds of Disney come to life at this park. Now, that doesn't mean that they only contain worlds. There are lands, for instance, World Premiere Plaza and Adventure Way has several different attractions and offerings, food and beverage, retail, and so forth. For instance, Tower of Terror is part of Adventure Way, and so, or actually more appropriately, World Premiere Plaza. And so are shows that focus on Toy Story and focus on Mickey. An animation exhibit is also part of that. They kind of all reside under an Art Deco theme, kind of Hollywood of the past environment. And that is a land, but there are rides and attractions that reside within it. However, what has happened that's made Disney Adventure World so different than its previous studio experience, which had, for instance, a backstage tour, still has the tram tour, but the original tram tour would show you different places like Catastrophe Canyon, or it would show you different movie sets and different themes or IPs along the way. Now what we have is several worlds. The first of them that was created a couple of years ago was Marvel Avengers Campus. In fact, there are 3 kind of Marvel Adventure worlds across the Disney parks, and this is one of them. There is also kind of a sprawling area that has been tidied up and called Worlds of Pixar. In truth, it includes 2 Cars attractions, it includes a Toy Story land within it, and it also includes Ratatouille, which has an accompanying restaurant and a retail experience. That's all been bundled under something called World of Pixar. The world of Frozen is the thing that has really become the focal point and discussion for a lot of individuals talking about, is this the way park lands and attractions are going to go? While the previous park was defined by a studio layout, now it's kind of going to worlds. Still, there are some orphans that are part of this little challenge here. For instance, there is originally a Lights, Motors, Action attraction, which was part of the park, and it's not very far from Marvel Avengers Campus. In fact, when Marvel Avengers Campus was being created, I thought, oh, for sure, they will create some kind of stunt show with Avengers in this space. Instead, they created something called Alice and the Queen of Hearts, Back to Wonderland. It's a remarkably unique and different kind of theatrical show, but it's not really attached to a land per se, and not really, it's really hard to say that this is really part of its own world. There's also Aladdin's Magic Flying Carpets. That is a kind of being considered part of the World Premiere Plaza. You wouldn't think that has anything to do with Hollywood of the 1930s. What they did is they kind of created a camera setup and some lights around it to look like you were maybe filming Aladdin, which doesn't make any sense because it's an animated film, but notwithstanding, that's kind of how they kind of bring it into the fold. But it's kind of a weird kind of, it just kind of stands alone. Another example is that one of the new attractions coming is a Lion King area. Now, this has been known for a couple of years now, and it's kind of a Splash Mountain experience, but based on the Lion King. And it looks very exciting. But what has not been shown or discussed, although it has been discussed in the last week or two, is the idea, is there anything else to go with it? It apparently will become its own world next to World of Frozen, because it is apparently going to have some retail and some dining kinds of experiences as part of it. What really needs to happen is there is an orphan over in Disneyland, in the Disneyland Park area. There's a theater called the Chaparral Theater, and it's really a great indoor theater setup, very important for winter months. And for a number of years now, they have been playing a Lion King show, and it's a very good show. However, it's very out of place. It has nothing to do with Frontierland. It just happens to be residing in a theater. There's no tie-in to how it would come together. It's a little bit how the original Lion King show at Disney's Animal Kingdom was at Camp Minnie Mickey, and you're kind of going, what? Why are all these people here in the Ozarks? It didn't really make sense. It was a show, an orphan of its own. This show would be great if it moved over to the new Lion King area, allowing some other show to go to the Chaparral Theater, which is part of the problem because, honestly, there just aren't a lot of frontier themes that would fit into that space. But notwithstanding, these are the challenges and things that Imagineers are thinking of. How to create these intact worlds uniquely dedicated to very successful intellectual properties, whether it's Frozen or The Lion King or Marvel. And then, but there's also benefits to having the lands, because the lands allow you to do any number of things. For instance, when you're in Adventureland, you have an Indiana Jones coaster at Disneyland Paris. And when you are in Fantasyland, you have Peter Pan's Flight, and you have Pinocchio's, and you have Snow White's Scary Adventures. So you're able to do many different intellectual properties within one without having to create a whole Snow White world or a whole Pinocchio world to go with it. These are the advantages of it. And it probably speaks a lot to what is kind of going on. Now, let me also mention, let's now move here from Disneyland Paris and go to the Disneyland Resort. The two parks, like Disneyland Paris, the two parks of the Disneyland Resort are also complete opposites of each other, and frankly are growing very differently, as one more being a land-based park, the original Disneyland park, and the other as a world-based park. Now, it isn't completely like that. For instance, when you get to Disney California, you have Buena Vista Street and Grizzly Peak. You have Paradise Gardens Park. You have Hollywoodland, and those are lands. Just like you have Main Street USA and Adventureland and Frontierland, even New Orleans Square, smaller land, but it is a land, and it's a land, not a world. because you have Pirates of the Caribbean and you have the Haunted Mansion. It's not one singular IP. You get to Bayou Country. Now that's where it gets a little tricky here, because Bayou Country kind of has an orphan of its own too. It hasn't always been kind of an orphan. When it was Critter Country, there was Splash Mountain, and then there was the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. And it was just kind of considered to be under the category of critters. But now you've talked about this area as being focal point of the South, and there is nothing Southern about the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. It has complete English overtones. And so it kind of sticks out as an orphan of its own in Bayou Country. There's also a very specific and one of the more original IP worlds, and that is Mickey's Toontown. It takes all of Mickey's characters and puts them into one area. Now, I say that because you could also consider it as a land, only because, well, Mickey's Toontown also includes Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Now, in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, we saw Mickey and his friends show up in the film. But you've never seen Mickey and his friends invite Roger Rabbit, largely because of copyright issues. You never see Roger Rabbit being invited into Mickey's world. You haven't seen him in shorts, for instance, with Mickey and Donald, or not that I've ever seen, and don't believe I have. So you kind of have Mickey's Toontown as one of those original worlds in and of itself. What's happening with Disney California Adventure is that it's ripe for having the combination of worlds as well as lands. Cars Land is perhaps one of the best worlds created. It is all about cars. It's all about Route 66. It is focused entirely on that intellectual property, and it does it really well. Several attractions, food and beverage, retail experiences, beautiful at night. Their characters in terms of the cars you get to meet. It's really probably one of the best, if not the best, world that has been created. And it's not a land. Even though it's Cars Land, I know, but it's really a world unto itself. That's why we're calling it a world. There's another world right next to it. It wasn't really a world. It was more of a land. It was more based on Northern California, but now it's become San Francisco Square. And it is perhaps one of the smallest worlds, but it is a world unto itself. It is about Baymax. It is about that thematic look and feel. And it is only one IP. And honestly, it's done that really, really well. There's no rides per se, a little meet and greet, and obviously food and beverage, a little bit of tiny retail. But what it does a world unto itself. It is an intact little piece of San Francisco. Avengers Campus also came to Disney California Adventure. And of course, it is a world in and of itself. It has Spider-Man and it has Guardians of the Galaxy, but they're all part of that same universe, and so it too is its own world. And frankly, it's continuing to grow with the addition of 2 new attractions. So it's going to be a pretty fantastic world when it's completed. But then they announced the Coco ride. Now, Coco is kind of sandwiched in between Paradise Gardens Park or Pixar Pier. Let me talk about Pixar Pier for one thing. Some might consider Pixar Pier to be a world in and of itself because it's all Pixar. But that's really many different... You don't see Toy Story characters in movies responding or interacting with characters from The Incredibles or characters from Finding Nemo. What this really is a land, and that land has been themed to Pixar, and so you have Incredibles, and you have Toy Story Mania, and the Carousel, and you have a couple of other offerings there that are all themed largely to Pixar characters. Will Coco be part of the pier? Maybe, maybe not. Paradise Gardens has kind of a Latin flair, and it's been used for their mariachi bands and so forth. Will it be kind of tied into Paradise Gardens? We're not sure. Um, but it's not really necessarily its own world per se, not in the same way that you're seeing with the potential of the future Pandora World of Avatar edition. In fact, it begs the question, would take the Pandora World of Avatar edition is intended to replace Hollywood Land. But is it possible that you could have built 3 themed attractions based on intellectual properties such as Monsters, which already resides there, but also based on other Pixar or Disney films, and have them based in the backlot area and tied to the backlot? Again, the studio's backlot idea has been kind of fading out entirely, and that's probably why you're looking at a Pandora World of Avatar edition, because they have probably thought that a solid big attraction like that would probably bring in more people to have its own world of Avatar than it would be to continue a land with simply more attractions in it. We spoke about Disneyland Park last week as I introduced my new Disneyland Insights, Inspiration Ideas, and Magic for you and your organization. Having sunk, I had a colleague of mine who sunk his teeth into just a little bit of this new multimedia style book. His description was actually dense. To me, the feedback was complimentary. If you like this kind of deep dive, nerdy Disney stuff I put out there and what we're kind of into, deep cuts today, if you want to then apply it to your life or to your work, then that's why that particular offering would be just right for you. Let's move over to Tokyo Disney Resort. It is largely Tokyo Disneyland, was essentially, well, no resort sits more firmly as a land, or in this case, as a sea-based park than Tokyo Disney Resort. There are a few exceptions, but they are exceptions many don't think about. At Tokyo Disneyland, you have World Bazaar, Adventureland, Frontierland, Critter Country, Fantasyland, Toontown, Tomorrowland. Now, I mentioned Toontown being more of a world than it is necessarily a land. Although it's very interesting here, even though it is an exact match to the one in California, but flip-flopped with all the same attractions and so forth, at least up until its recent remodel. It is not actually called Mickey's Toontown here. It's called Toontown. So it's an interesting little play on words there. Another little piece that most people consider to be a land is Critter Country. Remember, we just talked about how Critter Country is made into Bayou Country at Disneyland. Well, it's still Critter Country, and it's still Splash Mountain. But here it is entirely, there's no Winnie the Pooh in this section of the park. Here, Critter Country is really a world in and of itself. And in fact, one of the reasons people talk about, well, are they going to get rid of Splash Mountain, put in Tiana's at Tokyo? One of the challenges with doing that is that they made a fairly large investment in a food and beverage experience adjacent to Splash Mountain, in fact, attached to Splash Mountain. It's called Grandma Sarah's Kitchen, and it is very much a part of the Brer Rabbit world. It would be hard to think how this would be changed out if you were to go to Tiana experience. Even the canoes are called Beaver Brothers canoes, as suggesting that animals or critters are in charge of it. So it actually is a little bit of a world, but a world based on Song of the South. And so it and Toontown are kind of worlds in and of themselves, but everything else is a land. And when you get to Tokyo Disney Sea, well, frankly, a Mediterranean harbor, American waterfront, mysterious island, Port Discovery, Lost River Delta, Arabian coast, and even the new Fantasy Springs, which includes Peter Pan and Frozen and Rapunzel or Tangled. Even that is a land. It has a bigger Frozen attraction, but it is still very much a land because it's the Springs includes three different intellectual properties, not just one entire by itself. There's only one sea or land or whatever you want to call it, Tokyo Disney Sea, that is actually a world unto itself, and that's actually Mermaid Lagoon. When you go there, it is all about the Little Mermaid. And the attractions and the rides and everything has a very Little Mermaid look to it. Whether it's on the outside of the building or inside the building, you are looking at the Little Mermaid in big form. And in fact, most people don't even think of that as a world unto itself. So the most widely acclaimed park is really all lands, with one being a Little Mermaid IP. Even the smaller Fantasy Springs has three smaller districts in one land. They're not worlds unto themselves, even with better rides. By the way, note that Peter Pan has now two defined attractions in each park. No resort has, so that makes them actually siblings to each other. You have a Peter Pan ride in Fantasyland at Tokyo Disneyland, and then you have actually two Peter Pan attractions, different. You're not sailing in you're kind of sailing a ship in one, but the technology is different for it. But they are siblings because they are two. Is the same IP but spread apart in two different parks within the same resort. Over at Hong Kong Disneyland, you're going to see the same thing at Shanghai Disney. They're seeking to find, for whatever reason, a balance between land and world. And they've been doing it for some time. I mean, they were built with lands in mind, but they've gotten to become more of worlds. You have at Hong Kong, you have Main Street USA, you have Adventureland, you have Fantasyland, and you have Tomorrowland. And then they build some other attractions beyond the berm. And as fantastic as is Mystic Point and Grizzly Gulch, they are kind of mini worlds. They do not reside in their own lands. There is no frontier land. Mystic Point could have been kind of shelved as part of Adventureland, but they didn't do that. It's really, you got to go through Grizzly Gulch to get to Mystic Point from Adventureland. So they're not really lands. They're more like mini worlds. World of Frozen, and by the way, Toy Story Land is also one of those third spaces, and obviously it is a world unto itself, so Toy Story Land. World of Frozen, which they opened last year, is labeled as separate of Fantasyland, though adjacently beyond where Fantasyland resides. Meanwhile, there's a new Spider-Man attraction, which is being built, but it's a component of their Marvel district, which actually sits within Tomorrowland. So what's happening here is their Tomorrowland is really kind of two things. There's two Marvel attractions already, one based on the Pym Quantum being shrunken down, and another being based on Iron Man. Now they're adding a Spider-Man attraction, which is going to be like a Tower of Terror attraction, but all of it's still going to be sitting in Tomorrowland. So that's kind of an interesting thing how they're doing that. In Shanghai, actually, Main Street is a land in a park, but they didn't build Main Street in Shanghai. They built Mickey Avenue, which had kind of this weird component to it, which was largely Mickey. There was kind of a Goofy store and a mini, a bakery, product goods kind of store. They had a Remy's patisserie, which didn't have anything to do with Mickey and the gang, but it's since been changed out recently to Cookie and Bakery based on the whole teddy bear thing going on, Duffy and Friends, that is very popular in Shanghai and Hong Kong and Tokyo. And so that's been changed out. So it's even more a world in and of itself as the entrance to the park. Adventure Isle sits as a land. Fantasyland sits as a land with many IPs. Tomorrowland sits as a land with Tron and with Buzz Lightyear and with Stitch. Gardens of Imagination has a Fantasia carousel and a Dumbo flying elephants, and other characters are represented in its murals. They're all lands. But then they went and built Toy Story Land. Well, that's no big surprise. It's a world unto itself. So Toy Story Land got built in. And I should back up. They also built Treasure Cove, which I guess technically is a land, but Treasure Cove is based on Pirates of the Caribbean. Think of Pirates of the Caribbean as an entire land. The challenge is not everything in Treasure Cove neatly aligns with Captain Jack and that whole story and IP. There are some other kind of ships and characters that are in there. Now they do have a major entertainment offering, and it includes Captain Jack as well as their Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, which is very different than the other parks, but is very much tied to. So I guess it is a world in and of itself. But there are some funky parts that make you wonder if it's more of a land than the other. But now what also happened is they built Zootopia. Zootopia is not part of Fantasyland any more than Toy Story is. It's off to itself. It is its own unique thing. And then now they're building a new Spider-Man coaster. Whereas Hong Kong has got this Tower of Terror thing going, this one's going to have a coaster. But it is apparently being referred to as its own world in and of itself, and not housed near or in Tomorrowland, but actually between Zootopia and Treasure Cove. So I do not understand the thinking of how they have laid out this park with their additions. But they see this as more of a world focus. So Mickey Avenue now, Treasure Cove, Zootopia, Toy Story Land, and Spider-Man. There will actually, when it's all done, kind of be more worlds than there are lands at Shanghai. I think what they're trying to do in Hong Kong and Shanghai is try to advertise. It's easier to advertise a whole new world coming to, this park, as opposed to this attraction coming to this land. I think, and by being able to say that there are going to be 9 worlds or nine places to go to at Shanghai Disney, just kind of makes it sound like a bigger offering than you might otherwise consider it. By the way, a map, if you weren't aware, a map came out this last week, very fuzzy, but it actually shows the second park to Shanghai Disney, which I knew was in the planning to some extent. I knew of someone who was working on that park, but then ended his time working on it. It looks a little Epcot-like, but who knows that? And I say that because there's kind of this ball in the middle, Spaceship Earth looking thing in the middle. But who knows what that may be. It may be much more like a theater, like in this new offering in Vegas. But what we do know is that Shanghai, Hong Kong, and even Disneyland all have room to build another park. And any of those could be part of an announcement at D23 this August. I mentioned Disneyland. Let me come back to that before I go to Walt Disney World, because Disneyland's talked about extending California Adventure and its Disneyland Park across the street and over into other spaces they own, but they also own another space that could be a park in and of itself, and I could see that easily becoming 5 different worlds in and of itself. In that case, I think you would see more of a world experience. Although, again, it could be a land like, really, when you talk about Fantasy Springs at Tokyo Disney Sea, you're just giving an excuse for a fantasy land experience. And then you add whatever intellectual properties you want to add. Wreck-It Ralph, by the way, at Tokyo has taken over Buzz Lightyear. Buzz Lightyear is one of those twins that got replicated in a lot of different places. Let me talk about a twin that's really bad, by the way. And this kind of brings me to Magic Kingdom. Of course, the Magic Kingdom is a land. Main Street USA, Adventureland, Frontierland, Liberty Square, Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, Even the new Villains Land is a land. It is not a world. Um, this is actually the Magic Kingdom is the original twin park. It's a uh, for instance, the replica of the New Orleans version at Disneyland of the Haunted Mansion, other than the architecture being changed out, it really, and I know this is going to bother some of you, but Haunted Mansion has nothing to do with Liberty Square. It is its own orphan in and of itself. It looks a little bit more apart with the architecture, although, truth be told, nobody was building architecture like that in the late 1700s or early 1800s, which is the time frame for Liberty Square. But, we've kind of come to accept it. It's a Small World is the same kind of thing. When you really look at the original one at Disneyland, it was kind of this outlier, but it was just an attraction by itself. It didn't even have the little retail space next to it. Had, a kiosk for popcorn nearby, but it really was it was an orphan. It's just been adopted into Fantasyland. The same thing with Matterhorn. Matterhorn is an orphan. It was kind of part of Tomorrowland, but it's really become part of Fantasyland because it's kind of a Swiss element, and theoretically Fantasyland plays out to European themes, but it's kind of an orphan in and of itself. It's not based on any intellectual property or any fantasy kind of medieval kind of experience. It's bobsleds going up and down a hill. Piston Peak is very different than Cars Land, in that it will be an attraction within a land, not a world unto itself. I said earlier, Cars Land is one of the best worlds unto itself. But Piston Peak is part of Frontierland. They didn't get rid of Frontierland when they introduced Piston Peak. There's still Country Bear Jamboree. There's still Big Thunder Mountain. There's still Tiana's. It is still, and it will be a big land with Piston Peak included. But it is intended to be a land, not a world unto itself. And like I said, Villains Land is a land. It will have multiple villain-style experiences in terms of attractions, food and beverage, retail, but it is a land in and of itself. And I mention this because many people, again, are thinking, but they're going to do big intellectual property worlds. Well, they did in some instance. With the Frozen, World of Frozen, they created twins. One was basically twins. One was in Hong Kong Disneyland, opened up last year. It did have an extra little coaster, kind of barnstormer-sized coaster, gadget-style coaster to it, housed in a mountain. But other than that, it's pretty much the same thing as being done in that opened this week in Disneyland Paris. Now let's talk about Epcot. Epcot's so different than anything and everything else. It almost does not follow the rules of anything. World Celebration, World Nature, World Discovery, and World Showcases, if you consider those the lands of Epcot, then they are all lands. Because within each, you have lots of different intellectual properties or educational themes, and not necessarily just one. There are some interesting exceptions. In some ways, Spaceship Earth is not, when you talk about World Celebration, you talk about Connections Cafe or the gift shop, or you're talking about Communicore, you're talking about the Mickey Greet, you're talking about the gardens. All that is, in my mind, World Celebration, but it's kind of framed or bookended by Spaceship Earth, which is really about communications, not about celebration, and Figment, which is actually, if you look at the map, it's part of World Celebration. Now, World Nature does a really nice job of having things that are about nature. Moana's, seas, the land. But even then you get to the land, and it's almost a land in of itself. It has several themes. The seas, the same thing. And then we get to World Showcase. World Showcase is really 11 lands under one umbrella. But hear me out on this. None of them are a world unto themselves, in the sense that even Mexico, Norway, and France, which Each of them hosts two different IPs in each of them. In France, you have a Beauty and the Beast film, and you have Ratatouille. Norway, you have Frozen, of course, but then you also have within the what's the church they have right there at the front, you have these themes dealing with Thor that are presented within it. And then in Mexico, it's largely Three Caballeros, but they also talk about Coco within the temple as you enter. So they're lands. They're not one. It is not. Norway is not Frozen or World of Frozen. It is Norway with Frozen Ever After as part of it. Then you get to Disney's Hollywood Studios. Hollywood Boulevard, Sunset Boulevard, even the new animation courtyard, Pixar Plaza, which is that little space that opens during the daytime between One Man's Dream and Toy Story Land. And then also Commissary Lane and Echo Lake, they're lands, really. But once you're past the archway, the studios, back in the day when it was Disney MGM Studios, was kind of a world in and of itself. With attractions being in very separate spaces. So now with the addition of Toy Story Land and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, these are worlds. These two make you feel like the studios has potential to become more like Adventure World, particularly with the addition of the new Monsters Incorporated. You know, Muppets moved out. Now we've got a whole little Monsters world going in there. That will make a third world. If you looked at the map, you could still see that there's still room for at least two more worlds to come to it. So that's very interesting. The other thing I want to say about Disney's Hollywood Studios is we talked about the idea of siblings. Walt Disney World has more siblings than any other park. What it does is it likes to use intellectual properties in more than one place. So, for instance, Beauty and the Beast live on Broadway or whatever on Sunset Boulevard. Well, there's also a Beauty and the Beast experience and Fantasyland in Magic Kingdom. The same thing could be said with Toy Story. There's a Buzz Lightyear attraction in Tomorrowland. You could also talk about how the Little Mermaid attraction is also got its Little Mermaid show at the studios has got its sibling over in Fantasyland with the Little Mermaid ride attraction. So there's lots of siblings that kind of play out in each of these. Frozen Sing Along has a sibling at World Showcase with Frozen Ever After. Disney has done a lot of siblings. Universal is all about siblings. Harry Potter, which is a world unto itself, is really three siblings. Each of the three parks has a different version. Diagon Alley and whatnot, Hogsmeade, each have different versions of Harry Potter, but they're all siblings. The idea with Universal was, hey, you're a Harry Potter fan, you're going to have to go to all three to really embrace all that Harry Potter is. I can't imagine us having three Toy Story worlds within three different Disney theme parks, or three Frozen worlds, not attractions, worlds within Magic Kingdom and Epcot and the studio. That would be a lot of any type of IP. But hey, it seems to work for Universal. Could you, for instance, imagine Star Wars in not only the studios, but also over in Epcot in some form, and then over at Magic Kingdom in another form, or over in Animal Kingdom? Which brings us to our last one. Animal Kingdom is largely lands that are based actually on different climates and different terrains. Oasis, Discovery Island, not so much, more tropical. But then you have Africa, very clearly and distinct what it is. You have Asia, which is very distinct what it is. And then they chose to build Pandora World of Avatar. That is clearly a world in and of itself and very different than anything else at Animal Kingdom. So when they went to redo Dino Land, it's interesting. They didn't create an Encanto world. They didn't create an Indiana Jones world. They created a tropical Americas more akin to Asia and Africa. And within it, they have Encanto and Indiana Jones. But it's all under one umbrella. So it's a very interesting thing. By the way, they have a terrible orphan over in Africa. It's called Conservation Station. You get on the train, which is very much themed to Africa, and you get off, and then you go down a trail, and you get to this veterinary clinic, which doesn't have anything really African themed at all. It's now going to be a Bluey attraction in great part, but it is to an orphan. There are just really weird places. In truth, Echo Lake with Star Tours and with Indiana Jones, those are both orphans. They're just kind of one-off kinds of things sitting there that don't quite seemingly make a lot of sense to the theme of the area. You go to Echo Lake in California, you're not going to get an Indiana Jones, much less a Star Tours kind of Endor Moon thing going for you. So at any rate, you can kind of see, here are the key messages that come from all of this. Lands and worlds work for Disney. Not one or the other, both. While more worlds are emerging, the fact is that there are about 42 lands stretched among all of the Disney parks worldwide, and about 21 worlds. So lands are not going away anytime soon. You're not going to see a dominant use. Most of the parks are not dominantly going to be only one intellectual property emerge. Are there going to be more? If there isn't a Zootopia at some point in Walt Disney World, I'll be blown away. Same thing with Disneyland. I expect that. But I also could see Wreck-It Ralph, and I see Rapunzel, not necessarily its own world in and of itself, but being part of some land or some kind of larger land offering. Second thing is that lands allow smaller IPs to have a place under a large thematic umbrella, while offering space to creating an entire world for larger, more successful IPs. Lands will not be going away, but a land will always be looking for more IPs to justify itself. There will never be a land for its own thematic offering moving forward. There are very few, actually. Main Street is one of those places where you don't have a lot of IP within it. You have Mickey showing up and the parade coming through, but you don't have a dedicated ride attraction based on an individual IP. So there are Oasis is the same thing, very much. But don't miss the idea that building more of lands that have no IP involved, that's not likely to happen moving forward. Worlds allow one park to stand more distinctly from another. And that really works with Disney Adventure World in Paris alongside its sister park, Disneyland Paris. At Disneyland, you have Disneyland Park, but then by adding more worlds within Disney California Adventure, it makes the two stand out more distinctly. And then Disney's Hollywood Studios and Magic Kingdom, they're kind of in this. I mean, Animal Kingdom is its own thing. Epcot is way its own thing. But to really make the two stand out, it really does help to have more worlds within Hollywood Studios to separate it from the lands of the Magic Kingdom. And then Disney has created a number of twins. Oh my goodness, they've created a lot of twins. Attractions that were in one place to go to another. Toontown, Toy Story Land, World of Frozen, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge are worlds with twins of their own. And many of them, like World of Frozen, which opened this week, as well as Toy Story Land and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which are not that long ago, are fairly recent twins. However, I have the opinion that Disney's going to do a lot less creation of twins. And I say that because I think Disney in this economy, I think just within the last 10 years, people have woken up to the idea I don't have to just go to my favorite resort. I live on the East Coast and I always go to Walt Disney World. Now they're opening up to going to Disneyland. Or they're opening up to going to Disneyland Paris or to Tokyo Disney or Shanghai. They're opening up to going and seeing other Disney resorts across the globe. And I think it's in Disney's advantage to not have so many twins. It's okay once in a while to say, oh yeah, I wonder how this Haunted Mansion compares with that Haunted Mansion. By the way, talk about an orphan out of place. Haunted Mansion in Fantasyland at Tokyo Disneyland. I've heard all the excuses. It's more like familiar spirits and it's kind of more of a fantasy. I've heard all that, but it has nothing to do with medieval. There's nothing medieval about Haunted Mansion, and Fantasyland is about medieval things. And so it is so out of place. It's one thing to include Small World, but it is so out of place. Mind you, it's a great Haunted Mansion. It's well done. It's well kept up. I recommend going on it. It does Nightmare Before Christmas every year, but it's just a really odd orphan. And I think they're trying to make sure that they don't have more orphans moving forward. They're having to make changes in the parks, but they want to reduce the number of places where you end up with an orphan, and it doesn't tie in to what is around it. At any rate, that's our podcast for today. A lot we've covered in the time frame. Remember that for over a year, I've been capturing and sharing stories of Disneyland while creating a new online tool for you to explore all of them in one place. It's called Disneyland Insights: Inspiration, Ideas, and Magic for you and your organization. And it's an interactive multimedia experience. Now, this is truly designed for those who are seeking to provide individual and organizational leadership excellence, to create employee engagement and a team culture, and to offer a superior customer experience. Not only does the content have examples, stories, and models that play out to these themes, but each section provides souvenirs for you and your organization. There are reflective questions that may be used to better the work or operation you may be leading or being a part of. And in that instance, it's more of a business focus. So check out Disneyland Insights: Inspiration, Ideas, and Magic for your organization. There is in the show notes and also on DisneyInsights.com a link for you to check it out. Then, if you like something a little bit more familiar, don't forget my books from Disney Insights: A Century of Powerful Disney Insights 100, Lead The Wonderful World of Customer Service at Disney, and Disney Leadership in You. Plus my book, Lead With Your Customer, that not only deals with Disney, but lots of organizations. Lots to check out. Those links are in the show notes and at DisneyInsights.com. Check those out too. Thanks for joining us for this podcast. Know that as in the title of my organization, Performance Journeys, it is as much about the journey as it is about performance. So find the second star to the right and keep going straight until you reach it. Follow the compass of your heart and know with a smile and a song, a little faith, effort, and pixie dust, your dreams can come true. After all, if we can dream it, we can do it. Until next time, bright suns, we'll see you real soon.